Today, we're going to crack open one of the world's most fascinating legal texts, the Talmud. And we're going to do it by focusing on just a single ancient verse to show you how centuries of razor-sharp thinking can transform a few words into an incredibly detailed guide. This is going to be a real masterclass in logic. So here it is. This one sentence from Leviticus is going to be our entire universe for the next few minutes. It describes a ritual for a bird offering. Now, at first glance, it seems pretty straightforward, right? But for the ancient sages, this wasn't just a simple instruction. No. This was a dense, logical puzzle just begging to be solved. And that really is the question, isn't it? The sages worked from a core belief that every single word, every little turn of phrase was put there for a very specific reason. Nothing was an accident. They looked at this text like it was a divine blueprint, and their job was to reverse engineer the entire design from just these few clues. Okay, let's dive in. Okay, so right off the bat, the sages hit a problem. A verse right before this one already said that the offering should be brought to the altar. So why does our verse start with, "and the priest shall bring it"? It seems totally repetitive. You have to understand, in Talmudic analysis, there's just no such thing as a wasted word. If the text repeats itself, it's not a mistake, it's a signal. This apparent redundancy has to be teaching us some new piece of law, something we wouldn't have figured out otherwise. So what on earth could it be? And here's the brilliant answer. That previous verse mentioned doves and pigeons in the plural, which kind of implies you might need to bring a pair of birds. This supposedly redundant phrase, "bring it," is in the singular. That one word clarifies that a single bird is a totally valid offering. Just like that, puzzle number one is solved, and a potential legal mix-up is cleared. All right, so we've established the what, a single bird. Now the analysis zooms in on the core action. The verse says the priest will pinch off its head. But what does that really mean? Who is allowed to do it, and how exactly is it supposed to be done? Before we go any further, we need to lock in this key term, melika. This isn't just any kind of slaughter. It's a very specific technical act of pinching the bird's neck from behind. Getting this definition straight is absolutely crucial for what comes next. So, here's the next logical domino to fall. The verse says, the priest, sure, but is his personal involvement essential for this specific act? Or could, a non-priest perform the malika as long as a priest handles the rest? The sages don't just guess. They build a case from pure logic. Now, check this out. This is a classic example of Talmudic reasoning. The logic goes something like this. A sheep offering is actually more strict in some ways because it has to be done in a specific location, and yet a non-priest is allowed to do the slaughter. The bird offering is less strict because it has no location rule. So, logically, shouldn't a non-priest be permitted here too? I mean, it's a really compelling argument based on pure logic. But, and this is a huge but, pure logic can get overruled by the text itself. The verse doesn't just say someone brings the offering. It specifically, explicitly says the priest. And for the sages, that specific wording isn't just a suggestion. It's a direct command that overrides their logical deduction. It means, case closed, only a priest can perform this rite. All right, so the who is settled, it's the priest. Now for the how. The word is pinch, but is that literal? Or is it maybe a technical term for a ritual that could be done with a tool, like a special knife? Once again, back to logic. So here's the next logical argument. Regular animal slaughter doesn't require a priest, but it absolutely requires a tool, a proper knife. We just proved that melika is a more restrictive ritual because it does require a priest. So, following that same line of thinking, shouldn't it also require a tool? The logic here seems completely airtight. But then, we get this absolutely game-changing insight from one of the greatest sages, Rabbi Akiva. He argues that the verse's intense focus on the priest isn't just about his job title, it's about his physical body. The whole reason the text specifies the priest is to teach us that the act must be done with the very body of the priest. His own hands, his own fingernail, which means no knife. It has to be this incredibly personal, physical act. So let's recap. We have a priest performing milika with his bare hands. But the altar is a pretty big place. Where exactly is all this supposed to happen? The verse just says to the altar, which isn't nearly specific enough. The sages find their next clue hidden in the very structure of the sentence. The act of pinching, malak, is immediately followed by the act of burning, hiktir. This points to a really important principle of their analysis. If things are mentioned together in the text, they probably happen together in real life. Textual proximity implies physical proximity. And the logic just flows from there. We know for a fact that burning the offering happens on the fire at the very top of the altar. Since pinching and burning are right next to each other in the verse, it follows that the pinching also has to take place right there, at the top of the altar on the upper part of its wall. Now, just when you think we've got this all figured out, a new layer of complexity shows up. Turns out the bird burnt offering isn't the only kind of bird offering. There's another one, for sin, and comparing the two verses brings up a brand new, critical question. Okay, so by looking at these two verses side by side, the sages confirm that the pinching for both is done at the nape of the neck. But here's the twist. The verse for the sin offering explicitly says, but shall not separate it. The head is pinched, but it's not supposed to be fully removed. Our verse for the burnt offering doesn't say that. So does that silence mean that for our offering, the head should be completely separated? The answer, beautifully, comes by looping right back to that powerful connection we found earlier in our verse, the link between pinching and burning. Other verses make it clear that for a burnt offering, the head and the body are put on the fire as two distinct pieces. Therefore, they have to become two distinct pieces during the initial act of milika. The head must be completely severed. We are almost there. We're in the home stretch. We figured out the what, the who, the how, and the where. The very last action mentioned is draining the blood on the wall of the altar. And by applying that exact same principle of proximity, the sages conclude that since this action is mentioned right next to the pinching, it has to happen in the exact same spot on the upper part of the altar's wall. And here it is, the final result. From that one short, simple-looking verse, we now have this precise, step-by-step procedure. Every single action, every location, meticulously pulled out through layers of logical deduction and textual analysis. What started as a single sentence is now a complete, choreographed ritual. It's amazing. But here's a really important final point. Even in a system as rigorous as this, you don't always get one single, undisputed answer. The logic can lead brilliant people to slightly different conclusions. And that reveals the nuance and really the humanity inside this ancient legal tradition. Here's a perfect example. Everyone agrees the ritual happens at the top of the altar, but they debate the exact boundary line. The majority opinion allows for a little bit of leeway. Draining the blood just below the main ledge is still okay. But Rabbi Nehemiah is stricter. He argues everything must happen only on the top surface. And this small difference in interpretation has a real-world consequence, because it determines whether or not you could ever set up a secondary fire on the altar's ledge. And that really brings us to the end of our journey. We've seen how just a handful of words can be methodically unpacked to reveal an entire universe of law, logic, and ritual. And it leaves you with a pretty mind-blowing thought. If this level of intricate detail is hiding in one ancient verse about a bird, what other worlds of hidden meaning and profound logic are just waiting to be discovered in the texts, the stories, and even the simple sentences that we all probably read right past every single day?